Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art-related videos. My name is Eva and my guest today is Piper Thibodeau, and in this episode you will learn about how she manages to create a painting a day and her idea about creating reference mega library.
I haven't really gotten into this, but I would really love to create a mega library of different reference images so that I don't have to be looking through my different files and previous projects for those images that I really liked, but instead I could just pull that up like, okay, so here's animals, and I have specifics of like, oh, this is what wool looks like, this is what scales looks like. I think that's quite useful, and it will definitely save time for artists rather than scrounging around on Google.
Piper is a freelance character designer and illustrator who is most known for painting cute animals and critters. She has worked for clients such as Nickelodeon, Intel, CGMA, Concept Cookie and DreamWorks TV. Since 2012 she has been creating a painting every day before 12 am. And some of that work she collected and published in a book called Daily Paintings. So please welcome Piper Thibodeau and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life. Hi, and I'm super happy to have Piper here.
Hi there. Welcome to my mess of a room.
Hello, thank you for inviting us to your room. And yeah, let's start with your background, and maybe you can tell us a bit more how you got to art, and maybe when did you decide, okay, I want to take this professionally, like, okay, I love this as a career.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've always been into drawing monsters and creatures on my agenda at school, and it kind of evolved from there. And I'd say around the age of 15, I started to take it more seriously, and I went from just using a 2B pencil and some loose paper into using a small Wacom tablet at the time, which was an Intuos, I think. And then I was sort of getting into digital drawing, and it really started when I was 16, and up until now that I'm 25, that's been about the evolutionary period.
Oh wow. And so did you have like also some other creative outlets when you were a child, like also the inspired by animals, or did you have a lot of pets as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of interesting pets when I was a kid. Rabbits and birds mostly, and the occasional reptile that my mom got rid of because it was too smelly. But
so yeah,
my turtle that ran away.
Oh yeah, I was like, where is it?
I'm not even kidding. My mother had told me that my turtle ran away when I was 5.
Oh no!
I didn't buy it. I never bought it. That was a lie.
Oh my.
So yeah, I mean, I'd say, I mean, my main profession that I wanted to get into was actually to become a zoologist, but it didn't really turn out. So I mean, my stuff is mostly cartoony. For the obviously familiar with my work, it's really on the cartoon end. So I don't really have much realism yet, but I do like the ability and the freedom as an artist that even though I can't really get into the profession of being a zoologist without taking some significant time off of my main work right now, I could still appreciate it from an artistic standpoint as well, because I can study the anatomy behind animals and the behaviorism and how that would apply to maybe animation. So it's great to just I think that art is just such a general field that you could incorporate a lot of different subfields into it, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, definitely. Do you also watch a lot of documentaries and books about like animal life, I guess?
Yeah, I love those. David Attenborough is my favorite.
Which one?
David Attenborough. He's this famous I think he works for the BBC, and yeah, I pretty much binge watch all his content.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I hope that he's still got more years in him, because I think he's in his 90s.
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw some, and yeah, I still have to go through the rest of them.
Right. Yeah, he's great, and yeah, I mean, there's some. I think there's another artist out there. There's this artist, and I really apologize for butchering her name. For some reason, I just can't commit it to memory. I think it was Terrell Witchlet.
I think Whitlatch. Yeah, Whitlatch. Yeah, Terrell Whitlatch. Yeah.
I really have a trouble with those W last names. Anyways, sorry. What I wanted to just mention was just that I found her artwork really inspiring, because I think it really does bridge that that gap between art and science. And she I think she was definitely commissioned by Star Wars to do the character designs on the prequel films. And yeah, it's just great to see how she will implement that knowledge of a scientific illustration into a fantasy drawing.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
I mean, I never do that with my work, and I wish I can. And I think that slowly I want to work towards that, but it's just blows my mind. I think that she's extremely talented.
Yeah, there is a lot of studies of the anatomy and how the creatures actually work. So it's kind of like, yeah, as you mentioned, the bone structure, the muscles, and everything
Right.
behind it. So how to create actually the fantasy creature.
Right, and I think that it's just taken for granted because let's say working on an animated film, I mean, you could draw a stylized alien creature, but it's just so much more fascinating. It has so much more depth when you could understand how this thing evolved or how it walks or what it eats and the mannerisms that it might have. It's really quite fascinating. I love the field.
So how does your creative process look like, when you have like inspiration maybe from nature and, you're trying to create like a story moment and these combinations, like do you sketch or you write down the ideas you want to draw, or do you have a sketchbook with you all the time?
I really need to get more into the habit of carrying a sketchbook around me, but I would say that in recent months, I've been taking that more seriously. I've been trying to draw more than I have in the past. Uh, in general, I haven't been doing many studies, so it's hard to really answer that. But for my freelance work, I often will be doing I'll start almost, let's say with my dailies, for instance. I never really just jump straight into an illustration. I try to at least just test out what it will look like through a few sketches beforehand. And even a lot of times, especially when something is color dependent, as often my dailies are, I always will do a very quick draft of what color will look like on this thing. Because I think from what I've learned in my experience as an illustrator is the most painful mistake is color, because it's really hard to change later on. You could change quite a lot of things, but color is just probably the most unchangeables are really bad English. So,
Unchangeable, yeah.
it's just it's pretty fixated, right? And I find that especially when you're working on a larger project, like let's say a children's book, it's even important in that respect because it's a sequence of images, and if you're going to be reusing the same color palettes, that might be problematic because let's say we're using too many greens, and it's hard to see that if you're doing it just spontaneously and you kind of don't look at it from afar and just kind of see what it would look like overlaid on like side by side. It's difficult to kind of see if you're repeating yourself. So I really suggest to artists that regardless of what kind of project you have, before you jump in, try to minimize the risk. Although, I mean, I hesitate to give direct advice as an artist because, I mean, I'm still fairly early in my career and I don't want to lead anyone astray. So, I mean, hey, if you want to work in I think the values, there's some folks who will work with values, like the grayscale, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, if that works for you, that's fantastic. But for myself personally, I'm very paranoid about, starting to render stuff and then having it get wrong. But actually, just sorry, I hope I'm not going on a tangent. But what I would just say about the grayscale bit is that I think that you're a little bit protected because you don't really have to render you're not doing those values in color. Yeah. So you have the render done and all the details done, and adding the color is kind of just it's just a slap on at the end. So you could backtrack more easily in that respect. So,
yeah, because it's also good to check the values if your contrast is right and so the colors are working properly. Do you also sometimes do when you start right away with the color, then you switch it to black and white to just check it and then you go back to color, or you don't work like that?
I think it really depends on the depth of the illustration. Usually I don't. Though if I've been working on something extensively for over 20 hours or so, I'll definitely do that because I think it kind of because my stuff's usually not so realistic. It's sort of flat. Sometimes when they're very detailed, though, they won't be as flat. There's more of a 3-dimension to it. So in that case, I definitely will check back to make sure in the grayscale that it's functioning.
And when you have already the idea for a color scheme, do you just put down the colors on the side before you start painting, or do you do like different thumbnails of different color schemes, or how do you try it out?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I try to keep different thumbnails of attempted color schemes, and I'll go with whichever one I feel works the best. And oftentimes I'll take that one and I'll kind of push it a little bit further with modifiers. Because I find that using the curves tool and some of the hue and saturation modifications in Photoshop, it really helps to kind of harmonize all those colors together in a way that is a bit of a cheat, but I don't. Hey, if it gets a good result, who cares?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you can be more efficient and just put your message across and a story point, yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I would suggest to artists while they're working, I mean, it's sorry, I hope I'm not going off tangent by mentioning something about references, but I've kind of gotten to the habit more lately where what I'll do is, especially on larger paintings, I have a library ready of all these different sorts of references for materials. So, and anything I see in a scene that I know that I don't want to stop my painting and go on Google to go check, I'm going to have that there beforehand. Yeah. And I mean, it's not to say that you can't go check on Google, but I think it disrupts the workflow quite a bit. So it's better to really just do that first. And it's good because I think that while you're going on Google and you're searching for these reference images, you might actually inspire yourself along the way. And I think that it's quite useful. And up until recently, my workflow has been that I have a dual monitor, and I will put my references on the second monitor, and I'll be working with my main image on the first, because I'm working on a 22-inch HD Cintiq. So it's moderate space. It's not really a lot, but I thought that I was really sure that I wouldn't be able to kind of split my working screen with the references on the side in like 50-50, because I thought, oh, well, this is horrible. I mean, I have nothing to work on, but I attempted it before and I thought it was fantastic because it really kind of gives you a better look at, like, you know, the cross reference. Whereas like when you're looking at a screen, it's you have to turn your neck, and it's just, I know that sounds really lazy, but it's harder to kind of attach the images that you're looking on from the other screen onto what you're working on one set.
So do you put it in one file, or do you have it just as images outside of Photoshop?
I have it in a separate file in Photoshop, so I don't. I used to be putting them in the reference layers because I try to keep a reference layer on my my main PSDs, but now I just kind of have it as its own separate file.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because then you can close it if you don't need it, and yeah, because I also use the references as you mentioned. So if you are like not sure how the shape of some animal, of the ear or whatever looks like, or these kind of things, that helps.
Right, and in addition, I mean, I haven't really gotten into this, but I would really love to create a mega library of different reference images, so that I don't have to be looking through my different files of previous projects for those images that I really liked, but instead I could just pull that up, like, okay, so here's animals, and I have specifics of like, oh, this is what wool looks like, this is what scales looks like. I think that's quite useful, and it will definitely save time for artists rather than scrounging around on Google.
And do you like use it mainly from Google, or just like you put it on your computer, as you said, like you have libraries? Because for example, I use Pinterest, so I have all these boards, like as you said, like dogs, cats, I don't know what.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I kind of feel dependent on Google Images because it's the quicker option than Pinterest, but Pinterest has better images as a result, like they have better quality. Yeah, you can really kind of sift through to get what you want. It's interesting to kind of see the recommendation, like you'll be looking for one thing, and then there's these really awesome recommendations. Whereas Google, it's kind of like you're looking for wool, and there's like a picture of a car or something random in there, and it's just. You have to sift, but it is quicker, so it depends on the workflow, I guess. If someone could kind of take their time and they're less rushed, then I'd say use Pinterest.
And what about your workflow in digital terms? Do you have like favorite brushes you use all the time? Like, do you have few, or do you use a lot of them, or did you create your own, or how did that work for you?
I'd say that I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, but I take that back. I think that he's really familiar. Like he's quite a popular artist. Kyle T. Webster. He basically created this mega pack of brushes, and now they've been integrated into the recent Photoshop. So I don't really need to plug him in right now all that much, since he can't really buy them. But hey, props to him for making it.
Good,
obviously.
perfect. Yeah, yeah. I didn't know
So
he made them for the Photoshop, the predefined new set. So it's with the Photoshop CS, right? The new one.
right, yes, the newest release, I think 2018. Yeah, that has all of his brushes just in the defaults, which is fantastic because I think they're probably some of my favorite pre-made brushes. Overall, I feel like I tend to default to using defaults. I had a really bad pun there. Sorry. It's a force of habit. I do puns all the time. It's a curse. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of my stuff requires softer brushes for the effect that you normally see in my daily paintings. It's a lot of airbrush, kind of, and any kind of other brush that I use at the end. It's just more for little details. So little splatter brushes to get some spots and whatnot. I try to manually put scales in sometimes because it doesn't. Sometimes brushes don't really get the effect that I want.
Yeah, because they can start look repetitive.
Yeah, exactly. It starts to lose an organic look to it. But yeah, definitely for freelance work, it's very useful because you don't necessarily have all the time unless your client gives that to you. You don't want to kind of go overboard in that respect. So it's good to have a good array of brushes.
Perfect. And so how, when you mention also the freelance work, what is your kind of the main kind of income? What do you maybe live from? Is it from the client work or also like selling your art prints and book, or maybe how do you combine your incomes?
I'd say it's a bit of those three. I mean, I sustain myself off of my freelance work, but I also have a deal with the person that I did the book with, where I'm selling my prints on his site, and I get income coming from the book. I also have a Patreon, so thank you all you lovely people that helped me on there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good to definitely vary up where you get income as a freelance artist, because there's a bit of a danger involved with the certainty of getting freelance work, I would say. That's kind of the trade-off that you get for not working full-time in an office, because in that case, the worst you have to worry about is a layoff or getting fired. But I'd say mostly a layoff. Yeah, I mean, when you're working freelance, even if you're skilled or whatnot, you still have to understand it. Like, there's fluctuations within industries, like maybe animation might have a sudden turn for the worst, or maybe a boom. You really don't know. So it's really best. And also in that same by that same token, I would say that don't just shove yourself in one field. It'd be so if you notice that you're getting a lot of freelance work for animation, I would suggest that you try to take a step out of that. Not necessarily take a step out, but just put your eggs in more than one basket. So try to seek out work for toy design or for children's books is a really good one, because from what I hear, a lot of children's books publishers right now, they really seek out animation folks, because they really like that, like they understand certain fundamentals that regularly the people coming out of the illustration stream don't have with their work. I mean, I'm not sure. This is just secondhand information that I heard. Yeah, there's that advantage, and I would really suggest that you should always supplement it with doing your own work. And I know that's kind of difficult, because finding time for that is probably the most difficult element to that. But I would really suggest that you try just a little bit a day, even 30 minutes a day. Just try to make a lineup of projects for yourself that you could work on. And I think making a lineup is particularly very useful, because sometimes if you're like me, you have a project ADD, I suppose. Like, you just really can't stay because I mean, when you're trying to be creative, it's difficult to really just stay on track for one project the entire way through. You're going to kind of have moments of lapsed creativity. But I would say that, like, when you kind of vary it up into different venues, like you'll just work a little bit here, a little bit there on a different project, and you kind of keeps the flow going. I do that with reading too. I'll pick up 3 books and I'll be like, I have to get different genres because I have book ADD too, I guess.
So you just read more books at a time.
Right.
Oh, perfect. And how did you start the daily drawings? Was it the motivation from this? Like, okay, I just want to do something every day to improve, or what was your starting point?
Right. So I have to be very careful with how I word this, but a lot of it resulted with the fact that I just really wasn't fitting well into a school system in college. I had been going to college more out of a need to get a visa because I didn't want to get into a situation where if I was going to get hired outside the country that I'd be restricted from doing so, and that unfortunately happened. So I'm glad that I actually did finish my degree for that reason, but it was giving me a lot of difficulty because I'm not really the type of person that really fits into school. I mean, because I think that there's certain people that it's fantastic. That's why I'm really hesitant to say don't go to school. I think that some people it's a great fit. Other people don't really like constraints very much. So, I mean, whatever floats your boat, that's what matters. But make sure, obviously, that the finances are right, because sometimes art schools can really rake it up. The school I was going to wasn't expensive, thankfully. So what I would say in that regard is just I was experiencing an issue where I was doing a lot of 3D stuff because I was in a 3D program. And it wasn't really jiving well with how I normally do my work. So I wasn't drawing as much. And I felt like my ability was fading. So I really just ended up like there was a student in the class above me that was making a challenge to herself to do paintings for a year. And so I kind of wanted to do what she did, except I kind of went above the year limit. And because I guess I just really am stubborn like that.
So how long did it take? If someone in our audience, maybe they don't know. And yeah, so if you can tell us a bit more about that project, did it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have quite a bit to say about that. So what ended up occurring was that the first time I tried this, I failed catastrophically. I would end up doing this really dumb regimen where I went home. I have to travel 2 hours to get to and from school, even more than that, probably like 4 collectively in a day. So, I mean, I would come home completely exhausted. Instead of doing my homework, I was doing these, like I would probably stay up until 4 a.m. or something dumb like that, just trying to get my painting in for the day because I didn't give myself limitations. So it was really hard to put a cap on when do I call it quits? Like when do I call this a speed painting? And I kept being stubborn about it, and it was ridiculous because a lot of if you look into the early parts of my gallery, you'll note on DeviantArt, you'll notice that I tried it a few times and I gave up, and I would try it and give up. So I would get to day one, I would go from day 1 to day 10. And then after at one time I almost got to day 30, but if you look at it, I was doing these things called penalty dailies because I was trying to recap on the second day. So then I noticed that it's like, okay, none of this is going to work unless I instill rules. So that's what I did, and I just said, okay, so it has to be in before 12 o'clock or else it starts back to 0. So it has to be day 1. So even today, if I were to somehow screw that up, I'm gonna have to start back to day 1 unless there's a medical emergency. That's the only time that I give a pass, or a family emergency or anything like that. So sometimes life is just unavoidable. So I mean, I don't want to be unnecessarily cruel. But yeah, so I mean, it's not like I'm not trying to do a Guinness Book of World Records or anything like that. Or like my point is just it's more of a self-disciplinary thing. So people could try similar things like this and just alter the rules. I don't want to sound like you have to do what I'm saying, or if you want to attempt doing a daily painting regimen, but I will say that it worked for me in that manner.
Yeah, definitely, because you need to find what works for you, and kind of like maybe like because some people love to draw for like 10 hours straight, right? On the one thing and just fixing stuff because yeah, we are never kind of satisfied. Like, okay, this is done, move on to the next one. So we can. Like,
I really feel uncomfortable giving general advice because it's never good to just say what works for you and assume that it's going to work for everyone else. But you can suggest. So
yeah, but this is like from your experience, right? How your project actually worked out, and the same as you mentioned, the school, for some people it works really well. Then you create the contacts, or you like the workflow, and then others like to, I don't know, learn online and just from others maybe.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And if you are learning online, I would say that this is a fantastic time to try that if you find that you don't want to go to school. I think that the wealth of information online at this particular time in human history is just unparalleled. Like you could, there's books in the public domain. There's countless classes online from like professionals working at DreamWorks and what have you. So you have more than enough with like, let's say like, I think Noah Bradley. Yeah, it was Noah Bradley. He made a great article on why you shouldn't go to art school, which again, up to you, but I would suggest reading it, because if it's something that you're considering, he talks about how you could pretty much just take aside like $10,000 and you would supplement an art school education just fine, which is something I'm considering for myself, because I still feel like my art isn't really where I need it to be.
We learn the whole life, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. You know, you always want to be learning new things. Like, don't stagnate. You just try to, in the same way that I'm trying to do a daily every day, I would suggest that, you know, people should try to take a part of the day, you know, and just have that be even 15 minutes of just doing life sketches. It's nothing. You could drink tea for 15 minutes. So come on.
That's actually true. Yeah. And do you also draw sometimes, like with you? Do you have also like what is it, Apple, the iPad with Procreate, or you mostly draw on your Cintiq?
You know, I feel really bad right now because I skimped out on buying an iPad before because I wanted to be cheap, and I got a normal, I think it's a Samsung that it doesn't have Procreate. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, I really want to try out Procreate, because everyone's doing it and I'm so left out. But yeah, I have a Cintiq Companion that I was using. So
you can take it with you as well.
Right.
Although it's a bit heavy, right?
Yeah, that's my issue. It's just so bulky. I can't. I would. And at one point, because it was a really insane period of my life where I was getting work from DreamWorks, I was getting work from Nickelodeon, and I was doing freelance, but I had to go back to school to finish my degree. And I still lived very far away. It was really, I couldn't really move at that time. It was really inconvenient. I had family issues. So I would be taking my Cintiq Companion with me and trying to do that on the bus and trying to do it in class discreetly. Like it's kind of like the instead of doing the Game Boy, yeah,
with a giant screen.
With my giant screen. Instead of like kids who would play a Game Boy underneath their table, I'm trying to hide my Cintiq in the humanities class. Because I was really disinterested in the material. I'm just like, okay, yeah, whatever. I'll write an essay half-heartedly after this. I just want to get this degree.
And so, so how did it work for you when you found your first freelance jobs or the studio jobs? You were, as you mentioned, you were still at the uni, and so did they contacted you through the social media? Or they found you on DeviantArt, or maybe how did you do your networking?
Right, I think I'm pretty much 99% of my networking just comes from doing the daily paintings, which kind of supplements a portfolio, which is fantastic because I'm so lazy and I did not put a portfolio up in years. There's just some mental barrier to me doing that for some reason. It's really bad.
It's too constrained. Seems like you don't work well with constraints.
Yeah, but I have to say, if anyone's, for those listening to this, don't listen to me in that regard. Put up a portfolio. It's really stupid. Even for me, it's stupid. I mean, it kind of also might show. I mean, I'm just suspecting this, but there might be some art directors who don't appreciate that. Like they might see it as, okay, well, you're really disorganized, so I don't really want to hire you if you can't bother to put up a portfolio. So you kind of, I mean, I don't have access to a resume very, very easily at the present. So you want to make it feasible for clientele to access you, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the daily drawings you were posting mainly on DeviantArt, and then it was picked up by some blogs, and so, or where was it kind of spread?
Right. So what happened was I was kind of half-heartedly doing these dailies in the beginning, assuming no one was watching them. It really picked up after I did these Pokemon redesigns, and I ended up getting an Imgur feature, or someone went on Imgur, made a compilation of all the little drawings I did, and then Kotaku picked it up, and I got an article on that. So I got a stream of attention for my artwork, which is great. And I'd say that that really helped kick off my career. But the interesting part came afterwards, where I didn't want to do fan art, and I think that's a struggle that a lot of artists tend to have these days, where you don't really want. I mean, it depends. There's some people who are perfectly satisfied doing fan art, and if they want to do that, I'm not criticizing them, but I'm saying that for myself personally, my goal is to create a lot of my own IP. Yeah. So I didn't really like how people were expecting a lot of I was hounded by a lot of folks that wanted the Pokemon stuff done. But I really wanted to get my own stuff done because it doesn't mean that much to me to redesign something that I don't own.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to transition into that because I noticed obviously it wasn't as successful. So I did notice that the more that I did separate myself though, like my art was looking more distinctively like my own. So my pun stuff was kind of taking its own life, and which I'm really happy for because that allows me to just draw my own way. And I've noticed even now, if I do a fan art piece, it'll get an equal amount of attention. So I got the jackpot in that respect. So I'm really happy. Yeah, I leveled out, but it took time. I will say it really did. It wasn't an overnight process. I did experience a big dip in attention afterwards, and I think as artists, you have to risk it if you want to do what I'm saying. Obviously, if you want to keep the fan art going, I think that fan art here and there, if it's something that you like it's up to you again. Like this is just my opinion, but if there's something that I really feel I want to do, and especially parody type stuff, I love joking around. Like I did a Pikachu, but like a Picasso, so it's like a Picasso. I forgot even the pun that I did for that one, but like if it works, I'll fit it in there, and yeah.
And what about your inspiration? As you mentioned, like you have inspiration from nature, and do you maybe have something strange which inspires you as well? Some kind of like a combination of interesting, fun stuff.
I think that what really fascinates me is tiny microscopic organisms with like macro photography.
Oh yeah.
It's everyone I know that I show that to is freaked out, but I think it's adorable. And I was getting that fight with people, my friends in particular, that I'll show them pictures of water bears and they're really creeped out. But it's so cute. It has little tubby arms. I mean, sure, the face is kind of creepy. It's like a little suction mouth, but I mean, it has little tiny bitsy claws. It's cute.
Yeah, they have really strange shapes when you blow up. Actually, the image, right? And then you look at it.
It's so fascinating because it just kind of makes you think like, oh, maybe this gives insight into like how alien life would evolve, and that this kind of gets my gears going as to thinking as like what kind of creatures can I kind of create in that respect. And it's kind of hard to say because you don't really see that with my artwork that much, but it is something that I will work in time. But it does fascinate me, and it's really inspiring.
And when you mentioned as well that you drew a lot before when you started this project, how does your normal day look like now? Like how many hours maybe do you draw, or how much do you split the time maybe for going to nature or other ideas? What do you have?
I would say at this time it's a little bit up in the air. In the summer I was working quite a lot. Right now it kind of took a bit of a dip. Like up until last year I was working full time with DreamWorks, so. Yeah, there was that period where I would have a regular job. I would just do my daily on the side, so those were really full days. Then it kind of took a low period for a while where probably like 4 or 5 hours a day of work. Now it's pretty much the same, and I don't like that situation very much. I really have to kind of kick my bit. I just feel like I could push myself further, and I'm not doing that lately, so I really have to keep that going, because I think when you really just keep control, and actually this is a really important point that I would bring up to artists starting off, because I'm on a similar footing as you. I'm not as advanced in my career, so I could say this really truthfully. Watch your health. Really watch what you're doing with your health, because I really got in a rut with that, and it was because I thought that I'm invincible. I could pull crazy all-nighters. It's going to wreak havoc on you, and for myself, I got a lot of weight loss to a dangerous level, anemia. Like you could, it could go all across the board in terms of consequences. But the biggest consequence for you, and the one that you'll probably pick up on as an artist, is that it's going to take a dip on your work. Yeah. You're not going to have the energy to really sit through your stuff. The brain's not functioning as well. You want to make sure that you're sleeping enough. You want to make sure that you have a good diet, that you're hydrated, that you get enough exercise, because all that is going to contribute to you putting your best effort when you sit down in front of a computer. And even if you think that you're 21 years old and you're invincible, you're not. Like,
it'll come later.
Yeah. You have to swallow that pill fast, because you're gonna. And believe me, I remember it used to work. Like the first few times that I was trying that, like I could go days without sleep. It catches. Very shortly. Like you're not going to be, you'll be 21 and a half by the time it catches up to you. It's not years after the fact.
It's quite fast, yeah. And do you exercise, like do you go for walks every day, or do you like yoga or something like that?
Right. I do a lot of cardio activities, so like I walk quite a bit, and yeah, I think that it really helps to kind of get your brain going, I suppose. Also, I don't know why, it's just a personal thing, but like after I take my run, I just take the coldest shower possible and just completely wakes me up.
Yeah, refreshment.
And, yeah, it just any sleepiness that you may have in that moment is just wiped.
Yeah, definitely. Because I also
it's
try.
healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Because I try to do it as well. Like after exercise, like take a cold shower and like exercise every day at least like half hour or so. Because then if you are tired, it actually wakes you up, which is quite interesting.
Right. Yeah. I really want to look into standing desks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are talking about like how I mean I've heard a lot of artists, especially those who have been doing this for years, they develop a lot of back problems.
Yeah.
I think as an artist, you really have to look at the issues that people encounter from overuse of the material. So, for instance, I've been hearing that the blue light off of a Cintiq is actually very dangerous. So it could cause retinal detachment. So I actually got some glasses, and even though I don't really need glasses, I wear them anyways when I'm using a Cintiq because there's a UV glass in here, like an anti-UV ray glass, and it's you know it's yeah, and there's also a program called Flux.
Yeah.
And what that does is, unless people are not familiar with it, it pretty much after a certain hour, it's going to dim your screen to remove the blue light. Now, when you're having color-sensitive work, that's kind of problematic, so you have to vary that up. But I'd say that maybe even when you're not using color-sensitive work, you should probably turn the blue light off.
Yeah. I use that problem. I use the program as well. Like I'm not sure if that's the same name, but yeah, I think so. That it turns to yellow kind of light. That it's more normal, and also like lights in the flat actually helps if it is not all blue or this kind of office white. So it helps. But then, as you said, if you are painting something when you need to check the colors, then it doesn't work. Yeah,
that's not so great. Sometimes it involuntarily will go on when I'm doing my daily because I usually do them later in the day. So I have it set to 8 o'clock. And I didn't fix it yet, so I'll be doing my painting and slowly changing the screen. I won't notice it because it's so gradual.
Yeah, and then you're like, what's wrong with it?
Why is all my colors weird? Oh no.
Oh yeah, that happens to me as well.
Oh dang, I thought I was the only one. No. I'd say another problem is definitely carpal. You have to be very careful about carpal tunnel. That could put you out of drawing for a little while. I mean, I haven't seen anyone get major injuries from that, but it's still pretty disruptive, so it's good to do exercise. I don't know the whole exercise thing by heart, but like pretty much just make sure that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Cintiq should reduce that. I think it's more the hand to the mouse, but I don't want to. I'm not a medical professional.
So basically, we should take breaks. So yeah, everyone who is drawing, then we should at least like maybe 40 minutes or 1 hour just to get up or have a water or something like that, right?
Yeah, and you should always keep water on your desk. That's what I do. Yeah. Like don't make it difficult for yourself by having to get up and go to the kitchen or.
But then you don't get up, then you don't take a break.
Exact problem.
So you have both, but and when you mentioned also the social media and the networking kind of like online, do you go also to some festivals, or is it mainly the social media where you find new jobs?
Personally, I pretty much relegate myself to social media. I don't really do the whole festival route because I think it's a bit of an expense for me. I mean, when I do any kind of festival stuff, it's more conventions, and I'll be selling books or materials and meeting people and that sort of stuff, but it's less to make connections on the spot. I'd say that, I mean, I don't want to say that you shouldn't do it because, again, like, it's my experience. It's just not like everyone else's. And some people must have had great success with that, I'm sure. So, I mean, if you could do it and it's not inconvenient, like that's what you should put in your head. Is just, if you could do it. I mean, it's about the loss involved. I mean, like if there's nothing for you to lose and you have the money to afford the expenses and the hotels and whatnot, go for it. The sky's the limit. But if you do feel like, oh no, I'm gonna be in the red if I do this, like, well, I mean, you don't need to. Like, social media really does supplement quite a lot. nowadays.
Yeah. And so what are your projects like for the future? Kind of what would be your dream scenario in like 5 to 10 years, or maybe something you can share what you're working on now, which is not confidential?
I have quite a lot to answer to that, but unfortunately I can't talk about direct details. But what I could say is just that as a dream, I would love to really move into creating my own IP. Mm-hmm. And I have ideas for board games, for children's books, all these things I'm kind of working on here and there. A card game. I just said that, sorry. I have a graphic novel. I want to kind of get into that because I mentioned this earlier, but I love how art just doesn't have those constraints where you could like biology, and even if you can't be a biologist, you could still kind of implement that in. And I really, as an artist, I think my worst fear is just repetition. Mm-hmm. So I really do want to implement as many different projects as possible. And I think by doing my own IP, I get more freedom in that regard. So, I mean, my personal struggle about that, though, is I still don't really know if I'm going to go the route of a one-man company versus maybe collaborations with the said company, because it kind of feels like it's a bit difficult when you start having a studio and you have to keep track of other artists involved, which I'm not against it, but I don't know if that's going to kind of take away from the creative aspect for me or the fun.
Yeah, well, someone will have to manage it, so,
right.
It depends if it is you, or you can actually hire a project manager, or you can build your studio in a way that you can do it as well, or just share the creative idea. So, yeah,
right.
There are many different ways to do it, but it's actually really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would definitely do more research into it before I make a final choice, but that's definitely the trajectory that I'm hoping for. I still love doing freelance. I'm a little bit not interested in working full time. I mean, I had a great time doing it, but I think that I work better with flexibility. So that's still open. So
definitely. Yeah. And so what about like far future, and what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years?
So, I mean, I don't want to be obnoxious and say I want to be famous or anything like that, but like I'd say that if I could make any impact with my artwork, I would absolutely love to have tried my all with the time that I have on Earth, and I make sure that the work that I do inspires people and children in particular, and it makes people happy. I mean, if I could have that at the end, just knowing that I did the best that I could do and I made as many projects as I could and they had a positive impact, then I could die happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Super good. Yeah. And before we say goodbye and just finish the interview, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway from your experience, maybe something you wish you knew before you started, and then we slowly finish.
Right. I think that one thing I would mention is a piece of bad advice that I would recommend to artists to completely ignore. And because I'm very embittered about hearing this, and I just really hope that no one thinks this way. I remember some years ago I was told from someone that I knew before I really got into my career. I'm not naming names. I'm not even insulting the said person. It's just a mentality that needs to die, frankly. And that's that. Why bother going into art if you don't have any contacts so that you could get those jobs in the industry? That is so false. And the same argument was just that if you don't have enough money to go to the most prestigious school, you're just going to fail. None of this applies. You don't need any contacts whatsoever going into this. You don't need to go to the most prestigious school. I mean, I got all of my. I know that like I can't just use myself as a general example. Like everyone has their own individual circumstances, but I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt that from people that I've looked at, their careers, their paths and whatnot, like you are not dependent on contacts that you had beforehand. Like people are, and think about it realistically. Yes, nepotism is a problem that exists in every industry out there. I'm not going to say anything in regards to animation. I've never seen it in animation, so I can't talk. But I would say that probably less so in creative fields, because I mean, if you hire an artist to get into a project and they suck and they're there because their uncle, well, I mean, now the entire project is jeopardized because someone wanted to get their nephew in. So, I mean, it's nothing like that. Like, ignore advice like that if you ever hear it.
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, you build your network along the way and all of that, and you just get better every day. Then you get recommended by someone maybe you meet, maybe on volleyball, you never know where you meet the right people, and also on social media, just to share your artworks and see, and then you will find your audience, as you said. So yeah. Perfect.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so thank you so much again for being here.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was so nice, and yeah, a lot of good tips and discussions, so super happy about that. And thanks everyone who joined today, and see you in the next episode.
Bye guys.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I will be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!